up, dude? What's up, nerds?
Nerdrotic.com.
It looks like something's changing over at Disney Marvel right after we heard the news that there were massive reshoots with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. 6 weeks, 6 days a week. Now we hear the twice delayed Miss Marvel is going through extensive reshoots. I'm sure it has something to do with Spider-Man No Way Home, and I'm sure it has everything to do with the performance of the MCU in 2021. A year that started with WandaVision, a show about a woman who imprisons and tortures an entire town filled with men, women, and children, and then walks away free. Coincidentally, something similar happens in Black Widow, which features the female Mengele, who brainwashes and subjugates her daughters and her friends and is able to walk away free. Then there's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, with Freckled Jesus, a villain so great the Falcon and the Winter Soldier didn't want to fight her, so girl boss Sharon Carter had to take care of business. Then there was What If, where in a horrifying experiment, somebody put Peggy Carter's head on a man's body. This brings us to the first of our 2 bait-and-switch shows, Loki, where our titular character was punched in the face, kicked in the balls, he cried, and we found out that the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe was all part of Kang's plan. Followed up by Shang-Chi, who also got kicked in the balls and helped his sister acquire a criminal organization. Followed by The Eternals, which literally saved lives for having maximum representation. And we rounded out the year with the Kate Bishop and Echo show featuring a Black Widow epilogue and a guy named Hawkeye. A year where we saw Disney Marvel produce the most Marvel ever. A year of the Delta and the Omicron variants. A year of action figures ending up on the discount rack before the film comes out. A year that led to stagnation on Disney Plus and at the box office. A year where Black Widow and Shang-Chi contributed to Disney losing $65 million. A year where Disney unfortunately wasn't Sony, which managed to make the only 2 profitable Marvel movies. A year where everything changed with Spider-Man No Way Home. This brings us to 2022 and the current slate of the MCU. Now, it was reported back in November that Miss Marvel would be delayed. Now we know why. It's due to extensive reshoots. Miss Marvel is rumored to be getting some extensive reshoots this month. Miss Marvel News on Twitter clarified reports from Atlanta Filming concerning the reshoots. In addition to those accounts, My Cosmic Circus's Lizzie Hill talked about the size and scope of the reshoots, and they're said to be pretty substantial. What does all this mean for Miss Marvel? Well, at the moment, it's too close to call. Oh, really? Miss Marvel, one Kamala Khan, created by Sana Amanat, who we will talk about in just a moment, is a character created solely for one purpose, using woke identity politics to grab headlines. This show has already been delayed twice, along with the film she is set to appear in, The Marvels. Disney sometimes likes to attach keywords to certain properties that might not be that applicable, like triumph with Shang-Chi and popular with Miss Marvel.
When Miss Marvel first came out, we had such an incredible reaction.
You're a liar. It was so incredibly popular because everybody could see themselves in her.
No.
Her comic book and team books she's appeared in have been canceled multiple times. She was the main part of a video game that lost $60 million. I would call that the opposite of popular. I would also argue that your character has to have a lot more to it than identity politics and big fists. Then there's that costume. From Miss Marvel News, according to Atlanta Filming, Miss Marvel reshoots have begun filming in Atlanta, Georgia. Correction, they have not begun yet, but will start in a week or 2. This comes off the heels of a recent announcement. The Miss Marvel series has been delayed for a second time. It was initially scheduled to come out before Hawkeye began streaming on Disney Plus due to the extensive special effects. The first series, starring a Muslim superhero, was pushed back to early 2022. Now it has been delayed to the end of the year and may be delayed one more time, and I'm wondering if that's going to delay the Marvels again. And I remind you, the Marvels was Captain Marvel 2. Brie Larson was demoted in her own film, and then the film was pushed to February. Not exactly the best month for releases. Sana Amanat, one of Kamala Khan's co-creators and the co-creator of the current garbage era in Marvel, has called the pressure of the series intense. Well, it's intense because you decided to focus on identity politics over character. Some of that intensity has come from fans who have made the hashtag Fix Miss Marvel trend on Twitter. The biggest issue is the decision for the MCU to give the Pakistani American a brand new set of powers that are different from her Marvel Comics powers. In the comic book, Kamala is traditionally an Inhuman, and they changed her powers to being magic-based, which is verboten to a specific religion, according to some people on Twitter. A central plot of her debut in Miss Marvel 2014, written by G. Willow Wilson, Sana Amanat, and Adrian Alfano, was her shape-shifting into Captain Marvel due to her internal biases, making her feel as though a young woman of color from Jersey, New Jersey, could not be a superhero, except for the fact that that hasn't been true for decades, and the people constantly pushing this narrative are the same people who call large groups of people marginalized. And you're probably not going to be surprised to hear, in the long tradition of fanfic, Kamala Khan is a self-inserted character.
And it's sort of based on your life, yes? Her backstory.
I had created a character that I could identify with. She didn't look like the other girls in her class. She began to become fascinated with bacon. So clearly this girl was different, but she did have an outlet.
And writes fan fiction about her favorite superheroes.
She learns that who she is exactly what makes her a great heroine. I think sometimes people at Marvel are on heroin. The insanity continues. However, these changes are far from the only issues fans have with the series. It also cast Yasmin Fletcher, a half-Caucasian Christian actress. Of course, Twitter has a problem with that, as Kamala's friend Nakia Bahadir, a Turkish Muslim who wears a hijab. Yasmin Fletcher recently had to delicately address her role on the red carpet for Spider-Man No Way Home. Additionally, Zenobia Shroff is a non-Muslim Indian actress set to play Kamala Khan's mother, and of course, Twitter has a problem with that. Armis Knight will be playing Kareem, aka Red Dagger. Also got some pushback for being white passing. It is doubtful that any reshoots could be to recast major actors, play identity politics games, win expensive, extensive reshoot prizes. A lot of the controversy on Twitter comes from the introduction of identity politics itself. Now, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think anybody takes issue with Kamala Khan being a Pakistani Muslim. I am perfectly fine with it. I take issue with the constant obsession over race and division and the constant reinforcement of things like this being a white supremacist country. That's what Marvel fans have a problem with. They also have a big problem with the deconstruction of their characters, something Marvel has spent a year doing with characters like Hawkeye and Loki and Captain America. They've already killed off Iron Man, and they are set to be replaced by characters like female Thor, Ironheart, which is essentially going to be female Iron Man. We have female Loki, and now in the comic books, Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, is female.
You serious?
Borrowing a phrase from the great Carrie Smith, who was recently a guest on Friday Night Tights, identity is a cheap substitute for character. So when did this all begin? What are the origins of the MCU? Well, they're mixed in with the origins of identity politics being infused in Marvel Comics. That kicked into high gear between the years of 2013 and 2015, when the lines weren't only blurred, they outright disappeared between entertainment, Hollywood, and Washington. So much so, it was written about in The Guardian right around the time of Harvey Weinstein and Me Too Time's Up, right around the time of Oscar's So White, and also coincidentally, right around the time when one Sana Amanat rose to prominence at Marvel, who came out of nowhere. She went to university at Columbia, then she jumped to Virgin Comics, which went out of business immediately. Quick aside, it was at Virgin Comics where she learned the art of graphic storytelling. In other words, she didn't know anything about comics prior to that. Then she went to Marvel and she was giving TED Talks, and she was a star. She was going to change comics. It wasn't just for boys anymore. Now, I'm not saying that the co-creator and self-inserter of Miss Marvel is solely responsible for the SJW Marvel era, but she was definitely one of its architects. Basically, around the same time where all of our favorite forms of entertainment were being transitioned into, you guessed it, a platform.
An interesting few, months where I've had to embrace all of the aspects of being a Marvel superhero. And yes, it was an incredible experience to shoot, but also, it's given me this incredible, or
I'm a white woman with privilege and plot, or
Things were looking good for Marvel Comics, the MCU, and Hollywood in 2014. Remember when Marvel only released 2 movies a year, and in 2014, those 2 movies were Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Wow.
So how did we go from an era of 2 of their greatest movies to 9 live-action Marvel products and only 1 of them being good, and introducing more girl bosses than heroes? Well, it's something I've been covering on this channel from the beginning through my coverage of Star Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars, Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Game of Thrones, The Expanse. I could go on, but the best explanation comes from a brand new article sent to me by Chris Gore, Hollywood's New Rules. The explosion of woke, as one longtime producer put it, didn't come out of nowhere. Hollywood always pushed boundaries, from the 1947 Gentleman's Agreement, which confronted anti-Semitism, to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, rest in peace Sidney Poitier, which tackled interracial marriage, to All in the Family, which grappled with race and women's liberation.
The business world has been doing the same thing to us now that they've been doing to you. They're hiring token women.
Well, by the same token, hire one for me.
The original run of Will and Grace did more to advance the cause of gay marriage than anything pre-Obergefell. And then there were the villains. The vast majority, from the Terminator to Hannibal Lecter to Gordon Gekko, were uber white, an Austrian robot, a Lithuanian, a waspy, pinstriped capitalist. But it wasn't until 2015 when the Oscars So White controversy engulfed the 87th Academy Awards. That studio chiefs and producers really started to rethink how they did business. This gained momentum in 2016 and even more in late 2017 with #MeToo and the election of a certain president. Then came George Floyd and the summer of 2020. Everything that had been happening in slow motion started to happen much faster. This is where I'll differ from the article quite a bit. I would say everything was happening naturally until Oscars So White, Me Too, and the election of a certain president. And I have been chronicling this for years. As the article states, this isn't about white people not getting jobs. It's established writers of all makes, shapes, and sizes not getting jobs because they can no longer write about certain people because their skin color doesn't match or their religion doesn't match. Basically, it's when things got insane in Hollywood. Fast forward to today, and this is exactly what the controversy is behind Miss Marvel. We don't have actors that exactly match the character in a fictional story. And isn't it interesting that these are the very same people who will be the first to call somebody racist for calling out a tokenized superficial race swap? Again, no fan or paying customer has a problem with new things or characters. What they have a problem with is the constant subversion, vandalization, deconstruction, and outright destruction of their favorite thing. And when they call it out, they're called gatekeepers. Well, there's a Forbes article that explains the arguments pretty well, surprisingly enough. The reality is that fans love having people they can talk to in depth about their hobby. This kind of involved and almost studied discussion of a hobby is actually what keeps various fandoms ticking along, something Hollywood has no understanding of and something the activists could care less about. This means it's not in the interest of the fans to limit access to what they care about. And if people are genuinely curious about a hobby, the fans almost always tend to offer their help and insight. However, when you see someone online or even in the real world accuse a fan of gatekeeping, it's more likely the said accuser is not interested at all in the hobby and is actually a power-hungry would-be dictator or activist that wants to rule said fandom with an iron fist. Now, because there is a synchronicity in life, while I was recording this video, this article was brought to my attention. Disney CEO Bob Chapek lays out 2022 priorities in New Year's note to employees. Bob Chapek, who is nearing the 2-year mark since he took the baton as CEO for Walt Disney Company, has articulated 3 strategic priorities for the company in a memo to employees, referring to them as pillars. Chapek identifies the 3 areas are storytelling, innovation, and a relentless focus on audience. The exec status as Disney's sole leader was reaffirmed by 2021, officially coming to an end. Predecessor Bob Iger, who had stayed on as executive chairman and a creative consultant, officially ended his tenure on December 31st. Several of the long-tenured execs have also departed the company. On Wall Street's checklist for Chapek, the #1 item is hitting subscriber projections for Disney Plus. Those numbers have sagged a bit of late. late. I wonder what caused that, prompting concerns about its prospects after a white-hot launch in 2019, all due to the coof. In November, Disney said it added just 2 million subscribers to its flagship service. It has pledged to reach 230 million to 260 million from its current level of 118 million by the end of fiscal 2024. Well, you better buy Spider-Man outright. Resurrect Iron Man and Captain America, both played respectively by Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, and do an 18-part documentary on Scarlett Johansson getting naked.
Just take all my money. This soon?
Because, once again, I may be going out on a limb here, but I don't think you're going to get these kind of numbers with shows like Echo, Agatha Harkness, and Miss Marvel. Now, we're going to focus on the third pillar, the one concerning the audience. Relentless focus on our audience. We are a big company with many constituents and stakeholders, all of whom have a place in our decision-making. But at the end of the day, oh, I hate that saying, our most important guide, our North Star, is the consumer. And I hate that term, although there are a lot of Disney consumers out there. I think what Bob needs to focus on is the paying customer, the discerning paying customer. Right now, their behavior tells us and our industry that the way they want to experience entertainment is changing, and changing fast thanks to technology and the pandemic. We must evolve with our audience, not work against them. And so we will put them at the center of every decision we make. I would love to believe that Bob Chapek is the savior and, for a lack of a better description, the White Knight who's going to bring Hollywood back to reality, bring it back to neutrality, bring it back to equality and not equity. I just find that very hard to believe right now. I need to see real change with my eyes. Right now, all I hear is words, and we know words are wind. And when it's corporate speak like this from a CEO, it's usually broken wind. It would be nice if these reshoots were being done to make these characters relatable as humans and not vehicles for identity. Until I see different, I think these reshoots are just going to be more nostalgia bait. That was confirmed with Doctor Strange. We know that the 6 weeks of reshoots, 6 days a week, by the way, were all to insert more cameos, and maybe they're doing the same thing with Miss Marvel, and that's not going to fix your problem. Those problems remain, including all the people they hired who had to suspiciously delete tweets, all while Bob Chapek was in charge, including the director of Captain Marvel 2, Nia DaCosta, over at Lucasfilm, former Harvey Weinstein assistant Leslie Headland, and one of the writers of Miss Marvel, Bashake Ali, including this tweet from Sana Amanat in response to Eternal star Kamali Nanjiani. That's the future. Once we start interbreeding, Brown will rule. Mwahaha. Who thinks like that, really? And they don't see themselves as the problem. Honestly, I don't give a crap about Miss Marvel. She's a 5th or 6th generation derivative character, and of course, it's going to be a giant woke disaster. It's the news around it that's way more interesting. The success of Spider-Man No Way Home, the Doctor Strange reshoots, the Miss Marvel reshoots, the Bob Chapek article, and now the Hollywood New Rules article all points to some sort of change. Whatever that is, that remains to be seen, and Hollywood, and particularly Disney Marvel, does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. To fix a problem, one must first acknowledge there's a problem, but maybe some people in Hollywood are starting to realize everything woke turns to shit. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I thank you for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.